So the American Library Association announces their Youth Media Award recipients on a day in January. It's my favorite day of the year. And our focus tonight is going to be on some of the award winners. We can't not talk about all of them. Some are ones we read, some are ones that we loved. So some that won, and we'll try to carve out a little time at the end also to talk about some that didn't win, but we think are noteworthy and that people would enjoy.
Okay. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide, Rory. All right, so the first, I did it in alphabetical order because I'm a librarian. So we saved the Caldecott and the Newbery for last, but the other awards are going to be in alphabetical order, and we're starting off with the Asian Pacific American Award. This is a relatively new award. It definitely caught my eye 2 years ago because Drawn Together by Min Lei and Dan Santat won this award, and that was my favorite book of that year. I thought it was so incredible. So I'm really excited about both of these. Paper Sun, the inspiring story of Tyrus Wong, immigrant and artist, by Julie Leung and Chris Sasaki, was the picture book selection. It is a biography about Tyrus Wong, who came to the US from China and worked for Disney. He was an illustrator on the movie Bambi. So it's all about his experience as an immigrant, usually being the only person of color in the room at any given time at Disney. And I thought it was really interesting. Chris Sasaki, the illustrator, is a designer at Pixar. So that is like a perfect fit, right? Somebody who is a designer at Pixar telling the story of someone who is an illustrator for Disney. It's really lovely. I think they made a great choice with that one. And then When You Trap a Tiger, we are definitely going to come back to that one. But Julie, I just looked at the word Julie. Heather, do you have anything you want to say about that?
Yeah, well, it's a great earthbound fantasy about a girl who's struggling to come to terms with her grandmother being very sick. And it weaves in this Korean folklore about Halmoni the tiger. Halmoni is also what she calls her grandmother. And so she really, as she's struggling to come to terms with her grandmother being sick, she makes a deal with a tiger that comes to visit, who's looking for something that the grandmother took from the tiger a long time ago. So it's a really interesting story. It is, as I said, it's an earthbound fantasy. It feels very realistic, but it has this element of kind of magic and folklore running through it. And it's written by Tay Killer, who wrote a book I loved a few years ago called The Science of Breakable Things. So anyway, it's a great story, and it was a good choice for this award.
Absolutely. All right.
And the next slide features one of the honor books for the Asian Pacific American Award, and that is Linda Sue Park's Prairie Lotus. A lot of people have compared this to Little House on the Prairie, but it is a different kind of story. Hannah is a Chinese American girl whose mother was a phenomenal seamstress, and her mother has passed away, and she and her father are starting new in the Dakotas in the 1800s. Coming from the West Coast, where there were more Chinese people, Hannah is not seeing anyone who looks like her where they are now settling. So it's really a story about race. It's a story about acceptance. There are lots of themes that relate to that throughout the book, but it's also like, you know, it's a pioneer story, right? It's for people who like those types of historical fiction books, it has all of that, and Hannah is a really well-developed character as well. So this is one of my favorite books from 2020, and I recommend it.
Which is no surprise because Linda Sue Park is amazing. She's just an amazing author.
Yeah,
and the cover's out of the ballpark every time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now we've moved on to the Coretta Scott King Awards. These are awards presented to outstanding books that reflect the African American experience. So we've got a picture book and a chapter book or a novel. So the picture book is R.E.S.P.E.C.T., Aretha Franklin, the Queen of Soul, by Carol Boston Weatherford and Frank Morrison. This book is gorgeous. It was just absolutely beautiful. Frank Morrison started out as a graffiti artist. He did a lot of stuff on the street. His style is a beautiful marriage of edgy and like well educated. Like he, you know, then he went on and got a lot of training. So it's edgy, artistic. And he is also the illustrator of Let the Children March book from a couple of years ago. Wonderful book. And then Above the Rim, How Elgin Baylor Changed Basketball, which got a lot of buzz this year. I haven't been able to read it yet, but I just ordered it for the library. This is a beautiful picture book about Aretha Franklin, which I think should just be in every collection. So yeah, we ordered that immediately. And then Jacqueline Woodson, Heather will probably talk about this one, but.
Well, this is on my to read list. This is one I didn't get to, and I'm kicking myself because it is a novel in verse. So I could have read it in a night if I'd wanted to. But I do know that it is a realistic fiction story, and the protagonist is a boy named ZJ. And it's the story of ZJ's dad, who was a pro football player and is now struggling with some of the repercussions of playing such a violent sport. And it's affecting dad's memory, and it's affecting dad's personality. And so anyway, it's supposed to be incredible, and I'm really looking forward to reading it.
Yeah, and we know that Jacqueline Woodson excels at novels in verse. Brown Girl Dreaming, her biography, was a novel in verse, and it's incredible. Also, if she's not on your radar for picture books, she definitely should be. She has authored some amazing picture books, just like off the top of my head, things my students love. The Day You Begin, Each Kindness, The Other Side, Pecan Pie Baby. She did that one with Sophie Blackall, who won 2 years ago's Caldecott for Hello Lighthouse. Just great books. Jacqueline Woodson is a name to know for sure.
Yeah, she is a force.
She is a force. And then these are the honor books. Exquisite, The Poetry and Life of Gwendolyn Brooks by Suzanne Slade and Cosby A. Cabrera. I read this to my 6th graders, and they loved it. They loved this book. This is definitely one of those picture books that reminds you that picture books are not for very young kids. Like, they don't have to be for very young kids. They don't have to be limited to being used by very young kids. There's so much rich vocabulary in this book, and the illustrations were absolutely beautiful. There is one page where she's sitting on her back porch and she's looking out at this pink sky, and it was riveting. It's such a good mix of the realistic, like her just sitting down and like writing poetry, and then images from her imagination. So it's almost got like a magical realism feel to it. It's a beautiful book. I absolutely loved it. And you can see by the star, it won a Cybert honor. The Cyberts are an informational book award. So it won 2 awards. Good job, Exquisite.
Yeah. And King and the Dragonflies might have already been on your radar because it won the National Book Award last year, just a few months ago, and it was extremely well deserved. It may be the best book that I read in 2020. It's very hard to choose a book that I would say is the best. There were so many great books. King and the Dragonflies, to me, it has all 3 things that make a book great. It's beautifully written. Kaysen Calendar, oh, sorry, I was on a different tab. Kaysen Calendar has a way with words like no one else. The story is so powerful. And the message, the themes, the issues it tackles are timely, they are universal. So to me, that's what makes a book far superior to any other. And this is the story of a boy named King, short for Kingston. He is growing up in Louisiana. He is dealing with the sudden death of his older brother, who he was very close with. And unfortunately, he's also suffering through the death of a friendship. And that friendship is with a boy named Sandy. And King's relationship with Sandy is complicated because Sandy is gay and King is not sure if he can be friends with somebody who is. He's getting messages at home that are confusing for him. And yet what he needs more than anything now that he's lost his brother is a friend. And King is also coming to realizations about his own sexual preferences at this time. So he's a young kid. This is a middle grade book, and it does a really great job of tackling these transitions and these coming of age challenges that Kingston is facing. So it's fantastic. I highly recommend it.
All right, the Geisel Award. That's the Theodore Seuss Geisel Award that we have many librarians here, so all of you know that that was Dr. Seuss's real name. So the Geisel Award is presented to the most distinguished book for beginning readers. This one was not on my radar at all. The winner was See the Cat, 3 Stories About a Dog by David La Rochelle, illustrated by Mike Wonautka. It got a starred review in the School Library Journal, Publishers Weekly, Booklist, and Kirkus, so I'm not really sure how I missed this one. It sounds adorable. I looked up Mike Wonautka, his books at his very, very cute website. He has a lovely website. His books are mostly for littles, like I would say pre-KK or even younger. So if you are looking for really sweetly illustrated books for very young kids, I think Mike Wonautka is a great illustrator to look for. And I put this right in my cart at Mackin. I was like, See the Cat, click. So I'm looking forward to seeing it in person. All right, the Pura Belpre Award, presented to a Latinx writer whose work best portrays, affirms, and celebrates the Latinx cultural experience in an outstanding work of literature. This year's picture book winner was Vamos, Let's Go Eat by Raul III and colors by Elaine Bay. This is the follow-up to Vamos, Let's Go to the Market, which won a Pura Belpre Illustrator honor. So he's moved up in the world. He's moved from honor to winner. A lot of people have compared these books to like a Richard Scarry sort of book where there's so much detail that it's great for like one-on-one reading or for independent reading, because you want to be able to like pore over all of the amazing details in the book. And of course, they're bilingual, so it's great for teaching Spanish vocabulary to very young kids, and they're just a lot of fun. Like the illustrations are very quirky, but lots of kid appeal. So they're very like busy and colorful, and I don't know. I think it was a great choice.
Yeah, I agree. And I was not at all surprised to see that Ephraim Divided won the Pura Belpre as well. This book has gotten a lot of buzz because it is a very approachable story about a boy whose parents are undocumented immigrants from Mexico, and they live in fear all the time of his parents being deported. What's really kind of fun and unique about this book is that it does not apologize for weaving Spanish into the text in a really, really great way, where you can, if you do not speak Spanish, which I do not, or read Spanish, you can contextually figure out what those lines mean, but then there's a really great glossary of phrases. So it is, they are the actual sentences or phrases. It's not just words, but actual text, actual dialogue from the story is included in this glossary in the back. And that just brings an authenticity to the story that I thought was really unique. But the story is fantastic. Ephraim is such a likable boy. He deals with all the same friend troubles as anyone else. So again, it's one of these books that tackles an issue that may or may not be close to home for every reader, but there are so many other universal truths within that you absolutely cheer for this kid, no matter who you are. So great, great book.
Okay. Our next award is the Schneider Family Book Award. This is presented to books that embody the artistic expressions of the disability experience. Both of these books, so well deserved. I Talk Like a River. I loved this book. It is about a boy who has a stutter, who's kind and understanding father after a particularly bad day. He calls it a bad speech day. He had a bad speech day at school. Tells him that he talks like a river. ebbs and flows, rushes and lulls. And it really just helps the boy to understand that there's nothing wrong with him or wrong with the way that he speaks. It's who he is as a person. And you can tell from the cover, the illustrations are just lovely. And there's a big fold out in the center. That's like almost like a 4-page spread in the middle. So hard to keep nice in a library, but kids love that so much. They love that surprise of like, oh, there's more book, right? There's like book outside of the book. Just all of the water imagery, nature. It's really lovely. It's a very tender story. So I was really happy that it won. And I haven't had a chance to read Show Me a Sign yet, but I was so excited to see that it won because I have a friend who is working on her ASL degree. She is learning to be an interpreter, and I gave her this book for Christmas because it looked incredible. It's a historical fiction about the large deaf population on Martha's Vineyard at the turn of the 19th century, and it also incorporates the land disputes between the English settlers and the Wampanoag people. So it tackles some big themes, but apparently in a really accessible way. So I know Heather read it, right?
Yeah, I did. And it's an amazing story. I think in knowing the history, I read the author's note before I read the book, which I recommend doing because knowing that history of, first of all, just learning about all the different communities of deaf people that had their own sign languages, that was incredible to learn about. But it's a heart-pounding, it's a suspenseful tale. So there's a lot of action. It's not really just a story about relationships and about being deaf. It is a story about survival in a way. So I definitely recommend this one. I think it's really good.
Okay, so this is the Stonewall Award presented to children's and young adult books of exceptional merit relating to the LGBTQ experience. This book is impossible to find. It's not on Amazon. It's not at Scrawl. It's not at Mackin. You can get it at littlefeminist.com, and that's the only place that I've been able to find it. It's a board book, which is wonderful. Like, that's great. I love the idea of, I mean, kids love to see themselves, right? Kids love to look at other kids. Babies love to look at pictures of babies. So I think it's wonderful that it's showing the diversity of so many families for really young kids. It's targeted at like board book age kids. So, preschool. But it might be hard for you. It might be hard for you to get your hands on. So if you are interested in it, littlefeminist.com is where you should go for that. All right. The Sydney Taylor Award, presented to books that authentically portray the Jewish experience. The picture book winner was Welcoming Elijah, A Passover Tale with a Tale by Leslie A. Newman and Susan Gall. Susan Gall. This was so lovely. Beautiful, beautiful illustrations. Very simple, not too much text on a page. A great introduction, either, a great gift for anyone or a read for anyone who is Jewish and is familiar with Jewish traditions, but also a great introduction to things like Seder. So this story takes place on a Seder night. So it's a great way to introduce that to people who might not be familiar with the Jewish faith. And it's just a really sweet, sweet story. Great illustrations.
I love the cover of that book. And Turtle Boy is on my to-read list as of today. I will completely admit that was not on my radar, and reading about this book has got me really excited because it is realistic fiction, which is totally my jam. And it's about a 7th grade boy named Will who is having to complete a service project for his bar mitzvah. And his service project is to is to connect with a boy who is terminally ill. And as he builds his friendship with this boy, he makes a promise to fulfill bucket list items that this other boy has on his list, things that Will would never do. Will's a complete homebody. So I love this idea of Will doing this service project pretty much, reluctantly, and it opening up these opportunities for him to come out of his shell. I'm guessing I would also, I'm going to cry when I read this book, which I'm really excited about too. So
the little bit of reading that I did about it made me think of Wonder, because there's something going on with his chin, which is why in the illustration we see that he's got his the hood of his sweatshirt like up over his chin. He has some sort of chin like irregularity or unusual quality, and the other kids make fun of him for that. So I was thinking like, oh, this might be great for people who are fans of Wonder.
Yeah, that sounds like it. Awesome. Yeah. Good connection. Okay, so where are we now? We are on the Sydney Taylor Honor Book, right? So I did want to highlight this book because it's a great historical fiction book. It takes place during a time period that doesn't seem like history to me, but to young people, 1986 was a long time ago. And I don't think I've read a book, a historical fiction book about the Chernobyl disaster, but that's what this book is about. Valentina and Oksana have fathers who work at Chernobyl, and the day of the Chernobyl disaster in Russia in 1986, these two girls are forced to flee their homes with very little. They are like frenemies, mostly enemies in the beginning of the story. They go to school together, they live in the same apartment building, but they have very different lives, and they are forced to live together with Valentina's grandmother in, I believe, Leningrad. So the story is about this friendship, but it's also about the history of the time period, and interwoven throughout that story is a story that takes place in 1941 during World War II about, and it features a girl named Rivka, and she has to leave her family to escape the Nazis and travel through the woods on her own to find a safe place to live. So of course both of those stories come together in the end, but I know there are a lot of historical fiction fans out there. So for those of you who love the Jennifer Nielsen books, Blackbird Girls is definitely worth your time. I enjoyed that book tremendously. I'm really glad that it won an award.
All right, so we've made it to, I don't know, the biggies, the awards that have been around for a long, long time. My students were so interested. We're studying the Caldecott all year. That is what I decided to focus on this year during library lessons. So we've been learning about the history of the Caldecott and reading tons of different Caldecott awards and honor books. And they were blown away to learn that they've been giving a Caldecott award since 1938. And I was so glad that We Are Water Protectors won, because I read it and I loved it and my students loved it. So it kind of felt like a victory. I know it's not about me, but I still got really excited. I was like, yes, I know this one. I read it to my 4th and 5th graders. They all thought it was gorgeous. It's very timely. It has it's got a sort of a general message of being stewards of the earth. And that was really nice to talk about because they used that word several times. So we got to talk about like, well, what does that mean to be like a steward of the earth? And it also alludes to the pipeline project, the Keystone Pipeline project that, many, many people were protesting in 2016, and how we need to keep that spirit alive every day, that it can't just be like a one-time protest and then we just stop caring for a little while until the next protest, like that we can do daily things to, protect the earth. And also I really like, it had a refrain that repeated it. It said, "We stand with our songs and our drums. We are still here." And it came up multiple times in the book. So I got to ask the kids, like, well, what do you think that means? And we talked a lot about how, the Native Americans were here before we were here, but we often think of them as like historical, like, you know, that was, those were people that lived here before we lived here and now it's us. But no, that's incorrect. Like, there are many Native Americans here today living among us. We just might not interact with them as much as we could. So it's a really lovely book. I'm kind of rambling about it. I'll let you read it on your own. Highly recommended. Wonderful book. And then I cannot tell you how many Caldecott like shortlist books I read this year. It must have been like, I don't know, 60, 70, 75. I looked everywhere at every book that was getting buzz, and neither one of these books was really on my radar. One or two people at Calling Caldecott mentioned Catman of Aleppo, and then I looked at the cover and I was like, neither one of these books grabs me from the outside, which is why we don't judge a book by its cover, right? Like, we have to open the book and actually explore the book. So A Place Inside of Me, A Poem to Heal the Heart by Zetta Elliott and Noah Denman. The illustrator, Noah Denman, she did the Google Doodle for MLK Day. And she also was one of the contributors, the artistic contributors to Goodnight Stories for Rebel Girls. So you might have seen her work without knowing that you've seen her work. It's great. Like, her website is wonderful. It has beautiful work on it. And obviously, like, we can see right here on the cover, it says Black Lives Matter. It's very timely subject matter. So I'm not at all surprised that it won. I just wish that I had heard of it. So now I can't wait to read it. And then Catman of Aleppo by Irene Latham, Kareem Shamsi Basha, and Yuko Shimizu is a true story about a man in Aleppo who stayed there after the war broke out and ended up taking care of all of these homeless, starving cats. So, you know, it's like a tear jerker about like a good man who does good things for the world. And again, like, I went to the website of the illustrator, yukoart.com, and her work is phenomenal. It's so energetic and bold, and I just didn't get that from this cover at all. One of the things that jumped out at me was she's got a Jumanji poster featuring The Rock, like, just boom, like The Rock, and it was so good. So I don't know, hopefully once I actually get my hands on this book and see inside, the inside illustrations will have that same energy. I don't really see it on the cover, but a great story, of course. And then there were two more. Let's go to the next slide. Me and Mama by Cosby A. Cabrera. Cosby A. Cabrera is having a great year this year. And Me and Mama is a really lovely, gentle, and soft book. Someone called it, one of the reviewers called it, a picture book love letter to the bond between mother and child. It's great for bedtime. Just a sweet book about this relationship that this girl has with her mother. And of course, the illustrations are beautiful. That's the same illustrator that did Exquisite. So she's having a great year. And then last but not least, my favorite book of 2020, my favorite picture book. I was astonished. People called this a super long shot to win. But it got an honor. I'm so excited. Outside In by Deborah Underwood and Cindy Derby. It's so lovely. It's watercolors. I just want to take them all out and frame them. It's so beautiful, but also really, I don't know, I feel like I keep saying accessible, but that's such an important thing for children's literature, right? Not just that it's pretty, but that it resonates and it means something to kids. And the students that I shared this with really loved it and shared their own experiences of spending more time outside right now because of the pandemic. So I think No, it's really a timely book, and I was so excited that it got recognition.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kate. And it is beautiful. And I have to tell you, I'm super excited because that's one of the few picture book ebooks that I invested in this year during virtual learning. I think it might have been a perpetual. Oh, can you imagine? I felt like I win the lottery having that in my digital collection right now.
I know, doesn't it feel like that? Like you buy something and then it gets an award and you're like, yes, I did a great job.
Oh, yeah. Definitely. Oh, good timing. Okay. So moving on to the Newbery, the John Newbery Medal is extremely well known and held in very high regard. And as you can see, the Newbery Medal winner this year was also a winner of the Asian Pacific American Award, When You Trap a Tiger, which we talked about earlier. So I can only imagine Tay Keller must be floating right now. So we already talked about that one. We can move to the Newbery Honor books on the next slide. Okay, so I have to say I was not surprised, but very excited that all 13 by Christina Soontorbat cleaned up today. I am not a big nonfiction reader, but not only did I read this book, but I have raved about it to anyone who will listen. All of my students have been hearing this story from me about how great the book is. I mean, the story was in the news a few years ago, right? The incredible cave rescue of the Thai boys soccer team. Christina Soontorbat she is part Thai, and she went over to interview and research. The book is full of incredible photographs and documentation, the diagrams and charts, and the way she weaves the culture of the place into this rescue mission story is just fantastic. It did win the Morris. It was the finalist for the Morris Award, which is an award given to a teen debut author, as well as the Cyber Honor, which is, we said, is informational text, and a Newbery Honor. And it is just so well deserved. So for those of you who love to read realistic fiction, pick this one up. Challenge yourself and take the time to read all the nonfiction text features that bring it to life. It's fantastic. I will tell you, it weighs like 20 pounds. It is a full color. It is a big full color book, and it's heavy. So, but it is really, really good. And I have not yet read Box, Henry Brown Mails Himself to Freedom, but I will say that a book that can win an award for telling a story that's been told before must be a really special book. So I'm really looking forward to reading this historical account of Henry Box Brown and how he put himself in a box and mailed himself to freedom at a time when he had none. So we can move on to the next one. I want to be sensitive to everybody's time, and we have 3 more Newbery Honor books. That's right, there were 5 Newbery Honor medals given this year. Fighting Words, a lot of you are familiar with because the girls book club at Scrawl Books read this book, and not only that, but we got to talk to Kimberly Brewbreaker Bradley about it during one of the girls club events. And for anybody who has not read this book, it is a realistic fiction book by an author who is already beloved for writing The War That Saved My Life and The War I Finally Won. Fighting Words tells the story of 10-year-old Della and her sister Suki, who are moving into foster care after having lived with their mother's boyfriend for quite a few years. The mother is in prison for drug use and abuse. And Della and Suki have not had an easy life. Suki is a teenager who is struggling with her own issues. This is a book that is heavy, but feels lighter because of the humor and the voice that Della has. She is a spunky little thing. She is a survivor, and she has experienced abuse. And it's really about these 2 sisters finding a way to cope and get through. And Della, especially, if she wants to, I think, put everything past her. She has to find her voice. And, you know, last year, Kate Messner came out with a book called Chirp that did not take any awards today, but it was a great book that covered the subject of sexual abuse in children much more softly. And I think there's really there's an important audience for both of these books. You know, it is important to remember that sexual abuse in children happens to, it's believed, 1 in 5 girls, or 20% of women report that it happened to them when they were younger. And so it's something that we don't generally think, oh, we want to read a book about this because it's serious and it's dark. But it's there, it's happening to children. And this book gives you a perspective in a way that is very readable. It is not a book for teenagers, and it's not a book for grown-ups. It is a book for kids. It might not be for every kid. And so there, I just want to add that, you know, trigger warning that it does deal with some sensitive issues, but it is amazing. And I think everyone should read it. And I don't think anyone is at all surprised that it won a Newbery honor today. Moving along, I was just raving about All 13, but I also want to rave about A Wish in the Dark by the same author as All 13. So Christina Soontorvat is another person who is floating around the world today.
Having her best year and living her best life.
Right? And I loved this book. It's like a twist on Les Mis. It's about a boy named Pong who is born in a prison in this Thai-inspired city on the water. And he plans an escape. And it's the daughter of the police commissioner, I think, who is determined to hunt him down. It's like a fantasy adventure. It deals with you know, all those great themes from the best books like Harry Potter, you know, love and light driving out darkness and hate. And it's so fantastic. So A Wish in the Dark is a great choice from the committee. And last but not least is We Dream of Space by previous Newbery winner, which is Erin Entrada Kelly. And I have not read this book, but this is another 1986 historical fiction. Just compels me to say that. 1986 historical fiction book about 3 kids anxiously awaiting or awaiting the Space Shuttle Challenger launch, which we know did not end well. But I haven't read this, so this is another one that's on my to-read list. But I'm sure it's going to be great. Erin Entrada Kelly she's a very talented storyteller, so I can imagine it's going to be pretty fantastic.
I can actually remember where I was when that happened. I was in my elementary school library when the Challenger explosion happened. So yeah, it's absolutely on my to-read list too. As traumatic as it is to think of that as historical fiction, I'm really excited to read it.
Yeah, me too. So I just wanted to give a nod to 2 young adult books simply because I had read them and I think they're fantastic. And I know we have people in the audience who want to read books for older readers, not necessarily just middle grade and picture book. Kent State is a fantastically researched and powerful novel in verse by Deborah Wiles. This award went to the audio version, and I have not heard this, but I will tell you that when I read this book, I kept thinking it needs to be performed on stage. So I definitely need to read or listen to the audio because it has multiple voices. And I'm sorry, I'm just jumping right into what I love about the book without telling you what it's about. In 1970, on May 4th at Kent State University, a number of students who were protesting the war were pushed back by the National Guard. The National Guard was called in, and unfortunately, some people died. Some people were shot, and students. And this book really brings to light the many different voices, the voices of the community around the school, the voices of the students, the voices of the Black protesters who came in, who were like, okay, like we've been doing this for a while, right? Like all the different angles and all the different feelings of the many different parties involved, and it's just fantastic. So I was excited that the audio won an award, and now I'll have to listen to it. And then the book that I'm actually reading right now, and I have less than 100 pages to go, is Everything Sad is Untrue by Daniel Nayeri. And I have to say that I was almost in tears when I heard that it won the Michael Prince Award, which is like it's like the Newbery for young adults. Because this book is amazing. It's like nothing I've ever read. And it weaves in, it's an autobiographical novel about Daniel's growing up in Oklahoma as an Iranian refugee. And it weaves the Persian folklore of his heritage in with almost a silly, irreverent, but also sad experience of coming to the United States and leaving so much family and culture behind him. It's about assimilation. It's about the tragedy of being a refugee and all that you must leave behind, including some of your memories. And it's just exceptional. It's truly exceptional. And I was really, really glad to see that it won an award. So. And for those who are graphic novel lovers, maybe you've already read When Stars Are Scattered. It's certainly, I know, been a good seller, a bestseller last year. And I have never listened to the audio of a graphic novel, but the audio version of When Stars Are Scattered also won an Odyssey Honor Award. And this also won the Schneider Family Honor Award. And of course, the National Book Award finalist. It is a biographical graphic novel. It's the true story of Omar and Hassan, two brothers who were Somali refugees who basically grew up in a refugee camp in Kenya. And a lot of you will recognize the name Victoria Jameson because she won the Newbery Honor Award for Roller Girl, and she illustrated this fantastic graphic novel, and it's just so good. It's a book everybody should read. And Stamped, the audio version of Stamped by Jason Reynolds and Ibram X. Kendi won the Odyssey Honor as well. And that is how I read Stamped, is I listened to Jason Reynolds read it, because if you can listen to Jason Reynolds read something to you instead of reading it yourself, you absolutely should. And this is a book about race and racism. It's a nonfiction book, and I'm glad to see that it got a nod. So. All right, I'm just about done. These are my last two. We really were, we really want to make sure we get to talk about some books that didn't win anything today. And I tried to keep my list short. So I picked two. And I was only able to do that, I will say, because a lot of the ones that I loved luckily won awards today. But the list of things that will not change by Rebecca Stead is just a great realistic fiction book. If you have read anything by Rebecca Stead, and then you probably already know, it is always worth pre-ordering her books. And this book was no different. This is a book about Bia, whose parents get divorced, but they give her a list of things that will not change, even though they are divorcing, right? Like they will still love her and all of this. And this brings her comfort, but there's still challenges. And now her dad's getting remarried and he's marrying a man. And some of the family members don't agree with that. So there's some drama with that. And then the new dad is going to have a daughter who's going to be Bia's sister, which she's always wanted. But in true Rebecca Stead style, there's a plot twist. And I can't tell you what it is, but Bia has a memory from when she was younger that maybe she hasn't quite come to terms with. And so I love Rebecca Stead's books because I get so caught up in her storytelling and her characters, and that I never see the coming at me, but it's so good. And then a lot of you, Scroll Books did an event for this one too, which is Woke, a wonderful book of poetry, social justice poems written by Mahogany Brown and actually Elizabeth Acevedo, and I cannot remember who the other author is, and I can't read it because my picture.
Olivia Gatwood.
Thank you. These poems are great. My students love this poetry. This is poetry they can sink their teeth into. This is poetry it's like a call to action. The illustrations, the situations that are woven into these poems, like it's like something that children today are thirsty for. And I don't even know if they knew it until they read these poems. And I see them light up. Where can I get more of these poems is what they're saying to me. So Woke, A Young Poet's Call to Justice is fantastic. So, all right. Over to you, Kate.
Thanks.
Connoisseur.
No, I'm so excited. I love listening to Heather because she sells every book. Like every book she talks about, I'm like, I want to read that. There's never a book where I'm like, I can kind of pass on that. I'm always like, yes, I want to read that. So it's really exciting to hear her enthusiasm for chapter books. So I also included a list of books. I decided that I would start posting on Facebook 16 days before this event. So I picked my 16 favorite books of 2020 and I kind of counted it down. And now on this, I've kind of mixed them all up, but we're sort of going in reverse order. So my favorite picture book of 2020 was Outside In, which won a Caldecott honor. My second favorite book was Swashby and the Sea by Beth Ferry and illustrated by Juana Martinez Neal. Juana Martinez Neal is the illustrator of Alma and How She Got Her Name, which won a Caldecott honor 2 years ago. I missed that book initially because it didn't have a lot of like cover appeal and the illustrations inside are absolutely glorious. This to me, she nailed it. Like when I look at this cover, I'm like, ooh, tell me like what's the relationship here? Like I want to know more about this. Like I love this little blue crab who shows up in a lot of the pages. The color palette is absolutely beautiful. It's mostly beige and then different blues. And it's about a retired sea captain who lives by himself and he wants to be left alone. And of course, this little girl and her granny move in next door and disrupt his reclusive life. And of course, he loves them for it. And it's so sweet. Today, I made my boyfriend read this book with me. I made him play the part of the sea captain. And it's just a fun book to read. It's just a fun book to read out loud. When I Draw a Panda by Amy June Bates. Nobody was talking about this book this year. I read so many different blogs and somehow this wasn't on anyone's radar, but it really, as I wrote on Facebook, it hit me right in the feels. This is a book about a girl who likes to draw her own way. And I do not like to draw because I can't draw. So this is definitely one of those books about celebrating individuality and rejecting like perfectionism. The end papers are perfect. They are all of those they look like photocopies from the kinds of drawing books where you have to trace the lines, like, draw a perfect bear, draw a perfect cat. I love that just sets you up for the idea that she's not interested in that. So at the beginning, that you see that, and the end you have the same thing, only she's like scribbled all over them, which I really like. So When I Draw a Panda, definitely highly recommended. Rory, can we go to the next slide? The Blue House by Phoebe Wall. This is a book about gentrification. The boy and his father are both white, but they live in a neighborhood where houses are being torn down, old houses are being torn down and replaced by McMansions. And their landlord tells them that their house is going to be sold and torn down. And the boy is so angry. And the relationship between the father and son is really beautiful and tender. And I love the way that they deal with that anger. They do a lot of dancing, and dad like shreds on his guitar, and like the son like does some like scream singing. And then when they eventually move into their new house, which the son says, I hate it, I hate it, I hate this place so much, they end up making a really beautiful mural of the blue house on the son's bedroom wall so that he can look at it. So you see that they're like taking their memories and the things about like their relationship that are so special and bringing them into the new house, but it doesn't gloss over how hard that is, like how incredibly difficult it is to leave behind a place that's been really special to you. So I thought that was absolutely beautifully done. Lift by Min Lei and Dan Santa. I'm guessing some of you have read this book because it's so good and it was on everybody's list. Like everyone said.
Oh, I think everybody thought that was taking awards home today.
I'm shocked. I'm shocked. I mean, I'm shocked every year. I'm always like, what? But I was truly surprised. They're a dream team. They work so well together. Min Lei writes these incredible stories, and Dan Santat, who is just the most creative human being, just illustrates them in such a fantastical, amazing way. It's incredible. It has a little graphic novel sticker on it at the local library at Fairfax County. So it's kind of like a graphic novel picture book hybrid, which I actually really like. I think it's great when we kind of like mix the ideas of things. Rory is moving me along because she knows I talk too much. Okay, Rory. The next one is If You Come to Earth by Sophie Blackall. I thought she was maybe a long shot this year to win the Caldecott because she's already won twice. She won for Finding Winnie, which is a wonderful story about a bear named Winnie after Winnie the Pooh. And then she won for Hello Lighthouse just 2 years ago, but she's really good. So I thought she might win again.
This book is the book you give as a gift. Am I right? Like this is a book. It's so gorgeous. It's the story that there's so much in it and you could read it like 100 times and still find something new. It's so good.
So many details, just so many details in the book. And this character, Quinn, is almost like a Where's Waldo in the book because he's not in every single picture, but he's in most of them. And often he's kind of hard to find. So that my students really enjoyed, like finding Quinn, where was he? She wrote this book. There's a really great afterword about she traveled all over the place and talked to like hundreds of different kids. And she couldn't decide on a narrator for the book because she was like, I met all these incredible kids. Like, how am I going to have one narrator? And then she said she met a kid named Quinn and she asked him, if you were going to feed aliens, like if aliens were going to come to your house, you were going to feed them, what would you feed them? And immediately he was like, mashed potatoes, because they might not have teeth. And she was like, there we go. Like, you're it. You're going to be the narrator of this book. So yeah, it's an incredible book. It's beautiful and funny and kind of like tongue in cheek. And also, I don't know, the kids really loved, so he's writing a letter, he or she, they never say, so they are writing a letter to a visitor from outer space. And my kids really loved trying to figure out how they would get the letter there. Like, does it blow on the wind? How did they get the letter to outer space? Like, is there a rocket? So that's just like another layer to the book. It's really good. The Old Truck by Jarrett Pumphrey and Jerome Pumphrey. This book is just so lovely. It's just a lovely, lovely book. I especially liked that the brothers did not divide the labor. Like, one of them didn't write it and the other one illustrated it. They both did both. They really worked on it completely together. And they made, I wrote this down somewhere, but some incredible number, like 250 stamps, like handmade stamps for the book.
I thought it was like even more than that. Like, but you're right, it was a lot. Like, it was a labor of love. And there's a sequel. There's a new one.
There's already a sequel.
Yeah, but this was a book that everybody said was going to get something.
I was really surprised.
I was surprised too.
Yeah, so I mean, simple story. The little girl, her family has an old truck. It goes derelict. And eventually when she grows up and she takes over the farm, she brings the truck back to life. I mean, it's a great story about like hard work and dedication, and I don't know, it's just a really like sweet and lovely book. These two, I was worried that neither one of these was going to win because they're so similar. They're not, but they are, right? Like You Matter by Christian Robinson, and then All Because You Matter by Tammy Charles and Brian Collier. They're not the same book, but they give the same really, really important and timely message, right? That everyone matters. And the illustration styles are so different. But if you told me like choose between the two of them, I wouldn't be able to do it because they're both so wonderful in their own way. Christian Robinson is the illustrator of Last Stop on Market Street. He's done a bunch of great stuff. He also has a great one called The Smallest Girl in the Smallest Grade. That's a really good one. His stuff is just like really playful and childlike. And then Brian Collier, who has illustrated so many things. He is a 4-time Caldecott honor recipient. He's like always the bridesmaid and never the bride. One of these years, it's going to happen for you, Brian Collier. But all of these different like feathers that you can see on the front cover, there's so much detail, like so much work went into this book. And it's a really lovely story. So both of them, again, great gift ideas. These three, Julian at the Wedding, Nana Akua Goes to School, The Bear and the Moon, so visually appealing. Julian at the Wedding is a follow-up to Julian is a Mermaid, which came out a few years ago and is all about how gender and love are expansive and joyful and to be celebrated. It's a book that makes you want to celebrate. It's a feel-good book. Nana Akua Goes to School is about differences and how sometimes kids can be afraid of what's different. Nana Akua has some marks on her face that are an old Ghanaian tradition that isn't practiced so much anymore, and her granddaughter is worried about taking her to school for Grandparents' Day. What if the other kids laugh at her? And they come up with a really great solution to that, and the illustrations are absolutely glorious. I also found out, I listened to Trisha Elam Walker read it. She did a wonderful job, although I was like, she's not used to like having to show the pictures to the camera. It was really cute seeing her like navigate Zoom and trying to show the pictures. Her mother is a librarian. I think she's now retired, but it just was like a feel good. I was like, yeah, your mom's a librarian. And then The Bear and the Moon by Matthew Burgess and Katia Chien is just a really sweet book about loss. It's very gentle. The bear loves this red balloon, and then he plays with it too hard and he pops the red balloon, and then he's just being so hard on himself. For part of the book, he's like, bad bear, and then the moon comes out and talks to him and tells him that he's not a bad bear, and then he dreams about himself and the balloon at the very end, and the end papers show him like playing with the balloon, and it's like very lovely. I think we have maybe one more page. Yeah, I think this is the last page. So these three that all I thought looked nice all together. Hike by Pete Oswald. Pete Oswald has done so much good stuff. The Good Egg, The Bad Seed. He's illustrated so much good stuff. Wait, am I getting him confused with someone else? No, that's right.
That's not Jory John?
I'm confused with Jory John.
And I can't remember what else Pete Oswald has done, but I love this book, Hike. It's so sweet.
I think I am getting him confused with Jory John. Sorry, guys. But this book, Hike, is so excellent. It's like a real celebration of nature, and just like really lovely and well done. And we learn at the end that this is something that has been going on in this family for years and years. The parent takes the child out to this certain place to hike, and then they plant a tree. So it's another great one about like taking care of the earth and giving back to the earth. Okay, I'm not crazy.
You're not. I was just going to tell you, and I'm sorry, I should just shut up next time, especially if it's picture book.
Good. You're good.
John wrote The Good Egg, but Pete Oswald absolutely illustrated it.
Which is always a surprise when somebody you know as an artist writes the book and then doesn't illustrate it. It's confusing. Like when I think Jory John, I think artist, not author.
Or did they do it together? Because I don't know that it says author and you know what I'm saying? Anyway.
Yeah, we might have done it collaboratively, but Pike is great, highly recommended. My best friend, very sweet, for very young kiddo, about two girls, and throughout the whole book, they're talking about, like, the one girl, the narrator is talking about how the other girl is her best friend, and then at the end, it's revealed that they've just met. So at the end, it's like, next time I should learn her name. It's very sweet. Just like very charming. The color palette is really lovely. It's all like greens and peaches, which I thought was really beautiful. And then Almost Time by Gary D. Schmidt, Elizabeth Stickney, and G. Brian Karras. My students loved this one because the little boy in the story is waiting for his tooth to fall out. And that, like, the subject of tooth loss is huge in elementary school. All of my students wanted to tell me about the one time they had a loose tooth. Everyone wanted to connect with this book, which was great. Like, that's a great thing. They're waiting for the seasons to change. They're waiting for it to warm up so that they can finally tap the maple tree, and also so that his tooth will fall out. So.
And it's Gary D. Schmidt. It's
Gary D. Schmidt. And G. Brian Karras, who does a lot of good stuff.
He has a brand new book out. Gary D. Schmidt came out in January, so it wasn't eligible for an award. But if you like Gary D. Schmidt, I highly recommend Just Like That. It's so good.
We'll probably talk about it next year.
I think we might.